All right, here we go. Another day, another episode of Film vs. Analytics here on FantasyPoints.com and the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. Each day, we're breaking down a new rookie based on the Dynasty ADP, battling them out, Film vs. Analytics. I'm your host, Brett Whitefield, the COO of FantasyPoints.com and the resident film expert today. I'm going to be joined by Scott Barrett, the CEO of FantasyPoints.com. He is the best analytical mind that I know. Without further ado, let's get after it. We're going to be talking about JJ McCarthy today, the national champion himself. He is the ADP number 7. Let's go.
I've said this on previous episodes, but I'm very much a QB nihilist when it comes to the data and analytics. Like, I just don't think I know anything. I don't think anyone knows anything. I don't think they're particularly helpful. And so I told you months ago, I was like, what I'm going to do with quarterbacks is I'm just going to go take your rankings and then I'll adjust upwards or downwards based on how much they ran in college for their fantasy projection. And then you really are testing that to the limits here. So buried lead, Brett has JJ QB1. And so, and he's had him QB1 for a while. Like right now, JJ McCarthy feels like Bitcoin, where it's like it just keeps going up and up and up. You told me months ago JJ McCarthy was the best quarterback in this class. And the first thing I said to you was like, okay, well, hammer him being drafted at the 102 at plus 50,000 odds. And now, just 2 days ago, like that's skyrocketed. Now he's the most likely or second most likely player to be drafted 102 in the actual NFL draft. And like everyone's getting on board. It's like, oh, the NFL loves him. But you put this out first, way before anyone else. And it was super controversial at that time. It was super controversial. You didn't have Bryce Young as your QB1 last year either. Your track record with quarterbacks is great. You have to feel a little vindicated there just based on the pushback you got initially. Even if he isn't the 102 but like when you put it out, he was like a mid-range round one prospect and he's just been climbing up boards. But here's what I'll say from looking at the analytics. Michigan was blowing out every team they faced, playing behind the best defense in football, playing for Harbaugh, who loves to run the rock. I will just say, like, the lack of raw dropbacks are a concern. It's not necessarily something to hold against him, but it's a concern. So, per Football Insights, here's all round one quarterbacks since 2017 with fewer than 20 career dropbacks per game. That's Trey Lance, Mitchell Trubisky, Mac Jones, JJ McCarthy. And then there seems to be a positive correlation in the opposite direction as well. Brock Purdy, Justin Herbert, the list goes on and on. And so for me, it's just like there's a sample size concern there, both with the tape and the analytics, where it's like we barely know who you are. The more dropbacks, the more confidence we should have in your tape. And so like a question for you is just when you're watching the film, what did it seem like Harbaugh was protecting McCarthy, maybe only letting him throw in like perfect situations? But beyond that, he's young. His per throw efficiency metrics look really good. He was the most efficient quarterback on third and fourth downs. He was great under pressure, doesn't have the pressure to sack ratio concerns as some of the other quarterbacks in this class, especially the early projected draft capital ones. Per Rich Rebar, 49.7% of his passes came against top 25 defenses, by far the most of any quarterback in this class. He's not going to be a Konami code guy in the pros, but he has
Why?
more rushing production than you'd expect. So I have no issues with you putting him QB1. Like I think that might be totally on point. Like he might just be the best NFL quarterback in the class. My question is like, what's his fantasy upside? Like I still have trouble putting him above Caleb, who has a great supporting cast in Chicago that seems kind of locked in at this point, has some Konami code upside, will have the draft capital. Jaden Daniels, then just we should be expecting like at least Kyler Murray levels of rushing production, which is such a cheat code. And so like, what's his fantasy upside? He reminds me a bit of Brock Purdy, I think. And like, that's a concern because like Purdy was in the perfect environment last year, was MVP runner up, But he wasn't a fantasy league winner. He wasn't one of the Konami code superstars. So that's just my big concern. But I'm excited to hear you talk up your boy. I know for the folks at home, Brett is not a hot take artist. He just has naturally controversial opinions every now and then, but like he believes it. And once you listen to him, you're going to be far more sympathetic to those views.
So, first of all, Scott, I gotta say, like, you just beat me over the head for 4 minutes straight without letting me get a word in. So I have to unpack everything you just said. I was gonna congratulate you on being the Socrates of football, understanding the limits of your knowledge. I think that's what made Socrates a great philosopher, right? He knew what he didn't know, but then you preceded that by ranting at me for 4 minutes. So, maybe that maybe you're not the Socrates of football. I don't know. Anyways, I want to break down some of the JJ McCarthy volume concerns. And yeah, on a pure drop back basis, it is concerning, right? He's in that Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson territory as far as like raw dropbacks. Hasn't worked out with Trey Lance. Richardson's still a work in progress. We're not sure. It looked good last year, but season cut short, yada yada yada. That said, he is the highest percentage of dropbacks on 3rd and 6 plus. He is the highest percentage of dropbacks against top 25 defenses. Most of his throwing situations came in high leverage moments. And when you break down the fact that he's actually played in big games, something Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels hasn't done, that's also a tip of the cap to him. He's had to throw the ball in the biggest moments when the pressure is on, the stakes are highest. I think the idea that Jim Harbaugh hid him or only let him throw in perfect situations is absurd. I think we know Harbaugh to be one of the most stubborn coaches in you know, now the NFL, but in college football as well. Andrew Luck kind of went through the same thing. The volume wasn't as bad with Luck, but it definitely wasn't what it was for most, first overall quarterbacks. That said, you know, Michigan you mentioned they were blowing out everybody. They had a 21 point or more lead in 11 games this season. JJ McCarthy didn't even step foot on the field in the fourth quarter of 7 games. He left multiple third quarters early and didn't play in 2 third quarters. So you're talking about over 2 games of play time that he was on the bench because his team was winning by so much. I think these are some adequate answers to the volume concerns. I think if Michigan ever needed McCarthy to perform, he did, and he did it well. Go turn on the TCU tape. He almost single-handedly led a massive comeback in that game, which was a CFB playoff game. So, um, anyways, I don't want to talk too much about the volume stuff. I want to get into what JJ McCarthy does well. And one of the things I've tabbed McCarthy with is he's the best marriage between ceiling and floor. I think a lot of times when we talk about these high floor quarterbacks, you're talking about Kenny Pickett's of the world, guys who are a little safe. They protect the football. They'll run your offense. Like Bo Nix to me is a high floor quarterback, but he's not a high ceiling guy. The reason I like McCarthy so much, and I think his floor is so high, is because he does all those QB centric things very well, but it doesn't come at the expense of his ceiling. Let's talk about some of those QB centric things, right? So you have his ability to read defenses, to get through his progressions, to throw within timing and rhythm, and run the offense the way it's supposed to be run. He does all of that at the highest level in this draft class, and it's not even remotely close. His pocket awareness, his ability to manipulate the pocket, reset his blockers, slide, step, throw on the move. These are all things that he does better than any quarterback in this class. And again, it's not even remotely close. And he does all these things without sacrificing those high ceiling traits like arm talent. Guy has an absolute rocket for an arm. He can fit the ball in the tightest windows. I think probably the 2 most impressive throws in all of college football last year were JJ McCarthy. Not Caleb Williams. Caleb had the 70-yard bomb when he was scrambling and being weird and backpedaling. Great. That's cool. He can throw really far. McCarthy actually put translatable throws on tape where he was fitting the ball in the tightest windows imaginable. One against Michigan State and one against Ohio State. Arm talent and then mobility, Scott. You mentioned like he's not going to be a Konami code guy. I don't know why. He's a freak athlete. He's a 4.4 40 guy. He had the fifth fastest 3-cone run at the combine this year among all players, not quarterbacks, among all players. Like he is an elite athlete. He just wasn't asked to do it a lot because Michigan was, burying their opponents. So, I mean, in sum total, I think McCarthy is the most polished quarterback and he has the most room to grow. I mean, that's a great combo if you ask me.
Yeah. So reading Twitter, the most frequent comparisons you see for JJ McCarthy are Alex Smith and Zach Wilson. And I just feel like that's like impossible. But it really seems to be that way with like the differing positions is like, how is everyone watching the same player? And so the first question I'd like to know is what your comp, or maybe the second question is what your comp is stylistically for JJ McCarthy. And then the first would be, what is it you think McCarthy does well that the layman can't see or isn't valuing enough? I'm guessing it's mental processing,
Yep.
reading defenses, staying calm under pressure. Yeah, so I'll yield the floor back to you, Brett.
All right, first question. Things he does that the layman wouldn't see or notice. Go through. He played in that pro style offense at Michigan. All of his experience is coming in an offense that immediately translates to the NFL. He throws a full route tree. He's the best high low thrower in the class. So he's throwing pro style concepts, you know, at the highest level. So that pre snap processing to get his team in the right play, that's huge. That's something the other quarterbacks weren't really tasked with doing. Sliding his protection appropriately pre-snap, again, something McCarthy was doing that these other quarterbacks weren't. Post-snap, he's understanding defenses and what they're trying to do to him and understanding what the play call is designed to do and how to get through his progression based on that information. He's breaking that down at a super high level. He didn't make many mistakes as far as progression goes. The turnovers he did have usually came with just a little overabundance of confidence, where it's like, "Hey, I'm that dude, and I can make that throw," and then usually got himself into trouble. But for the most part, going through his progressions, he was as dialed in as I've seen a college quarterback. So all of these things are hard for the layman to see. Obviously, they're sometimes we don't know and understand defenses, we don't understand progressions, we don't understand pass concepts on a high level. So I think the layman would have a hard time breaking that down. When you put on the other guy's tape, you see Drake May and Caleb Williams scrambling around in the backfield and then throwing the ball 70 yards downfield. That feels cool, but that doesn't really work in the NFL. No, literally, no one's doing that in the NFL. So
Can you
uh,
really hammer home the importance of that? Like if you can't do that, is
yeah,
that a disqualifying factor? Any examples of quarterbacks who can never figure that out? I'm guessing Justin Fields,
yeah, I was just
because
gonna
we
say
brought it up before.
Justin Fields, that's the most recent example of a guy who just couldn't functionally run the offense he was tasked with running. Couldn't get through his progression. This was an issue at Ohio State too. This is why I was correct on Justin Fields coming out. And Fields really struggled. He didn't develop that at all. And that's probably the bigger issue is Fields just never grew as a player. Like I think the raw talent obviously was worth the pick that they took him with, but then he didn't grow from there. So that's the concern with the other guys, right? Where JJ comes in is like there's not a developmental curve needed. He's already doing it. I think the only thing JJ really needs is reps under his belt. He just needs more playing time. He needs to get in there, get some reps under his belt. That's really the only thing he needs.
Well, what's your comp, Brett?
Oh yeah, my comp. One John Elway. And I know again, you're gonna say, "Oh, Hall of Famer, what the?" No, I mean, this is a style comp, right? I'm not saying McCarthy's gonna have Elway's level of success. He could, but ultimately, this is a style comp. When I see McCarthy, I see the guy with just an absolute rocket for an arm, and he's got that sneaky athleticism. And I hate that term, sneaky athleticism. But McCarthy, because he wasn't asked to run a lot in college, you really don't. A lot of people don't know that he's an elite runner of the football. It's actually kind of crazy. And Elway was. He was a little before his time as far as mobility goes. When he was a young man, though, that guy could absolutely extend plays with his legs, move the chains. If there was a QB run game back then, he would have been involved in it for sure. The grit, the winning, all of that. I just see John Elway, JJ McCarthy kind of exudes that. I don't know. It's almost like this West Coast, I don't know, peace about him. He has this calm to him that John Elway always had as well. And I like everything from personality to play style. It just exudes John Elway to me.
You have as the comp John Elway, maybe the best quarterback of all time, certainly one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Daniel Jeremiah has Alex Smith, a bunch of other people have Alex Smith or Zach Wilson, which I see a lot on Twitter.
Yeah, we can
And you
address,
have
by the way.
what's that?
We can address those comps if you want.
Okay, I will say mine would be Brock Purdy, but like first half of the season MVP favorite, the good with Brock
Okay.
Purdy, just like how awesome he was under pressure at like, you should be getting sacked here. Instead, it's a touchdown because you did something special. But yeah, this is you're sort of alone on a hill here, and it's a hill you might die on. So yeah, how you feeling, Brett?
I feel good. I mean, I've already been vindicated. When I put out, so I told you a week before the Super Bowl, privately, McCarthy was my QB1. And then I went public with that the day after the Super Bowl. I was the first. I have receipts of every blue check media guy talking about how he's a late first round pick at best. Most people had him in the second round. And you and I have talked privately. We knew the day would come where McCarthy would be a consensus top 8 pick. Now he's basically a consensus top 5 pick, it seems like. So yeah, I already, whether he's not going to go 1 overall, I've already given over to that, but I've already feel vindicated that he's going to be a top 5 pick more than likely. Just like I was with Richardson. The same thing happened last year with Richardson, Scott. When I put him out as my QB1, everyone said he was a second round pick. And sure enough, he went 4th overall. I instantly felt vindicated. Then he put on tape what he did in the short season he had. It was awesome. So feel great. I feel awesome. I'm
The Colts had Anthony Richardson as their QB1 in the draft. The Vikings tried to trade the farm for Anthony Richardson. Yeah, you were definitely vindicated there. I see you being vindicated again. Did you want to just hit on those Alex Smith and Zach Wilson comps?
sure. So I see the Alex Wilson comp or Alex Wilson. See what I did there? I see the Alex Smith comp a little bit more because of the like Smith was really, really good in the structured part of offenses, even coming out of college. Now he played in a really dumbed down system in college at Utah, but he could run the offense. He did make full field reads and progressions. He had some nice short area and intermediate area accuracy. Where I don't see it is I think McCarthy is a much more talented player. I think he has those ceiling traits I didn't really think Smith had. Now, granted, I wasn't grading prospects back then. I just know how Smith's career played out and what the perception of him coming out was. I don't think McCarthy is going to have to live in the check down world that Alex Smith did for years. The Zach Wilson thing, I don't see at all. Wilson, it was bad in structure. He was not a guy who liked to. He was more on the Caleb Williams spectrum, if we're being honest, where there's a lot of his big plays were him extending, creating beyond the confines of the play. I really don't see that at all, and it's the fact that you're getting both those two comps that are polar opposite of each other. Scott, just shows you how little film people have actually watched on JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, to be fair, there's not a lot of film though, right?
I mean, there's
100
enough.
career
There's enough to
dropbacks
not
now.
make that comp for sure.
No, so all right. So I'm messing with you. Let's tie a bow on this then. For fantasy implications, he is the 107. Um, I'm guessing even though Drake May has a little bit more rushing upside, it's just not close to you. The disparity in talent, the disparity in potential to play as a starter for X years in the league, that you would much prefer to either trade down for JJ McCarthy or maybe even just take JJ McCarthy where you would have taken Drake May. But yeah, remember that was my chief concern was the fantasy upside. I
Sure.
mean, if he goes to Minnesota, like I think he's going to
Oh,
smash
dude.
because like the backups all smash there, and I'm confident McCarthy's better. That's a team that leads the league in dropbacks every year. So yeah, just let's tie a bow on this with keeping my one concern in mind where you would take JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, if you're getting JJ McCarthy at 107, that's a slam freaking dunk. That is ideal in a two QB super flex. That is insane. I'm also not conceding that Drake May is automatically going to be a better runner than him. I don't think that's guaranteed. I think it
Mhm.
really depends where they land. Maybe if JJ lands in Minnesota, he's not going to have the rushing upside Drake May if he lands somewhere else. But it really will depend on the coordinator. Because I have no doubt McCarthy has the same, if not better, running ability as Drake May. So it really just depends how creative their coordinator they land with is. Like if JJ lands with Cliff Kingsbury, you're going to see a lot of QB run, and I think JJ's rushing upside would substantially pass Drake May's, and vice versa if May landed there. So
Love it. All right. Well, yeah, can't really disagree with that. So there you have it. JJ McCarthy, fantasy points favorite. Get on board.